Most breaches are caused by exploiting oversights in basic cybersecurity fundamentals, but complex hybrid multi-cloud infrastructures make cybersecurity hygiene challenging. Red Seal can help. It shows you what's on your network, how it's connected, and the associated risk across public cloud, private cloud, and physical environments. With Red Seal, you'll get control of your cybersecurity fundamentals so you can protect your organization from the inevitable attack vectors and reduce your cyber risk. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/Red Seal.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. We are looking for high-quality guest suggestions for our Enterprise Security Weekly podcast to fill our upcoming recording schedule. We're committed to educating and providing entertainment for the InfoSec community, and we would love to hear from you about who you'd like us to interview on the show. Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and submitting the form. We review them on a monthly basis, and we'll let you know if you're chosen to come on. Also, join Qualys for VMDR Live on April 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern for a live demonstration of the game-changing vulnerability management, detection, and response offering, a unified solution that integrates vulnerability management, threat prioritization, and patching in a single app. Register at securityweekly.com/VMDR 2020. All right, gentlemen, let's get into the articles this week. I focus these a lot around guidance for executives with work from home. Obviously, we're in this interesting environment right now where we have a lot of remote work going on. So I looked at leadership articles to help there. I looked at some communication articles to help. So really trying to help the broader audience with some of these challenges.
Matt and Jason, is it all right if we do like a short segue into something that is related to this topic? So what helps, I think, working from home is a new laptop. And so I got one for myself because I did the math, and I had the slowest laptop out of anyone in the company. Now I have 2 other computers, but I also control the budget for equipment. So I thought it was a good time to talk about, as it relates to working.
Paul, don't be giving any of these crazy ideas out to my end users here, all right?
But I think
we can't outfit everybody with a brand new laptop.
And it relates to security and budgeting, right? Because it's important. And I think during this time, as Matt, you were alluding to, this is a crisis that we've got to do some things different, which means more people work from home, which means more people are probably asking for newer laptops. And how do you do that all within budget? Now, thankfully, I have a small budget, but it's also a small team and requirements that support that, right? And it's a monthly budget, and I try not to go over, like if I'm over 1 month, I try not to basically eat up like the whole half of the year with my entire budget, so I've got nothing to spend for the rest of the budget, right? And so I try and spend in a timely manner, right? Like if we can wait to buy something, and that means I can buy something else and plan it out. So, I build a spreadsheet that helps me track all of that and project out like, well, if I buy this in this month and this in this month, right? And so here we're lucky that all of our old equipment gets recycled into the podcast in some capacity. So the justification, and that's not always the case in IT, right? If you've got 10,000 laptops out there, like you're not recycling all 10,000 of those, right? But for the few that we have, my old laptop it's going to have Windows on it, and it has a purpose now in production, which helped me save budget because that machine I was going to buy for it, right? I can take that budget and buy myself a new laptop, which is what I did. Because working from home, yes, I have an office with a desktop, right? But working from home, I may need to keep an eye on my kids somewhere. I may need to work in other parts of the house and things like that. And do more work on my laptop, which I wanted a better laptop for that. So, and just something with a nicer screen, better battery, like all those things make working from home, I think, a little more enjoyable. It allows you to be a little more flexible when working from home. Also, you get the latest hardware and software too, right? So if you're thinking about upgrading laptops and upgrading operating systems, sometimes you got to balance that into the equation of cost. Is it cheaper for us to go buy some new laptops rather than trying to upgrade hardware and software on older machines? The prices have come way down. Now, the caveat with this whole thing is the availability is not great. I mean, when I'm buying computer stuff now to support us working from home, right, and all the things we need to do as a company, I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at Amazon probably last, to be honest with you, because they've really reprioritized their whole shipping thing, which is what was going on, I think, from the beginning, but they really came out and said that. So my other sources, I'm looking at Newegg, I'm looking at Walmart, I'm looking at BH Photo Video. You know, between those other 3 or 4 sources that I found, I'm able to get, well, I got the last one of this one, and Tyler, one of our co-hosts, was kind of mad because he's the one that recommended it to me. And when I said, Tyler, I think I want this one, he's like, that's such a great laptop for a great price. He's like, I'm trading mine up for that. I'm like, well, you're not getting it from Amazon because I got the last one. So,
no, I mean, Paul, to your point, right? I mean, having an asset lifecycle management program is huge, right?
Yes.
I mean, the last thing that my organization wanted going into this, where we're going, 98+% remote, is to have people's productivity hindered because their laptop wasn't up to speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want folks running off of 8-year-old laptops. So here it's an investment. It's a productivity thing. It's making sure that we're not expending a lot of cost trying to repair old laptops, because now that's human capital that you have to put in the mix, right? So there's this balance between making sure you're putting newer assets out there into the environment, or you're getting that cost of productivity hit, and or assets actually, going out of commission, right? Because they're older. So having part of resilience is having that life cycle program where you're getting newer assets into the environment on a cycle, right? For us, laptops are typically a 4-year cycle for us. And we're making sure that at least every 4 years, we're getting brand new laptops out there into the field.
Now, I did upgrade operations manager and sales first before I upgraded myself, okay? And I said, whatever's left over in the budget is what I have to work with, okay? So I did prioritize like that, Matt, right?
Well, and the other thing you have to realize is that with a lot of these remote video call, they suck up a lot of CPU and memory. And if you're running on an older machine, there's a dramatic performance impact when you're on Zoom or Skype or some of these different services.
Right? Yeah, and for my remote studio at home, like we did some Zoom calls with the family on my new laptop, and I was like, oh, it's so much nicer. Now when I go into the studio, I'm not like making sure everything's closed down, like fingers crossed, is it going to work? Because my old one was actually starting to fail on me during shows and stuff, and I'm like, this can't be happening right now, especially like if I'm home and we need to do a show. My studio, I have to bring my laptop out there. So I'm like, no way.
I mean, that's a good point too, right? Typically, we profile the end user. Our engineers have a different model laptop and a different lifecycle program than somebody who's like, let's say, in HR, right? Because the engineers have a lot more workload going onto those machines. So we need to spec them out accordingly and make sure they're on a lifecycle that won't hinder their productivity. Where someone in an HR role or an administrative role, some things of that nature, different model, right? Different specifications and different lifecycle program.
Yeah. Also, and having worked remotely for years, I always made sure my laptop always had the right power that I needed wherever I was, right? Now I've got a setup at home where I can plug it in and there's 2 beautiful 27-inch Thunderbolts. But when I'm on the road, it's the same computer.
I tell you what, the large monitors do really help productivity. I'm serious. I mean, gaming is a different thing, because doing regular work, you don't need like ridiculous refresh rates and all that stuff, which really drive the cost up. You can get really nice monitors. John Strands, I mean, he's got like a 50-inch curved monitor. He's like, I'm done with multiple monitors, right? But I mean, if you can justify that stuff, it is a huge help for not just engineers, right?
Yeah, because I have 10, 15 windows open at any time. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, crazy. All right, so let's actually get into some of these articles, because we'll hit some of these points again, because in one of them we talk about getting the right gear. I put the right in the middle of that when we talk about video conferencing kind of on this topic. But, there was an interesting article from some of the different C-suites on kind of how they're handling, what they're doing during this. And not every single one was quoted in my summary. I thought there were some really interesting ones. Todd Green, CEO of PubNub, said, look, it's all about transparency, right? The ability to be transparent, communicate with your staff is going to go a long, long way with this remote workforce. But there were some other great things in here to help people with culture of being remote, right? Some of the things that other remote workers are taking on to kind of engage other employees with remote things. The hijinks, kind of the goofing around in Slack, where we do that on Thursday nights in PSW, right? Just some things to help engage those remote workers.
Well, also, I think it's a time, and I'm not sure if anyone has mentioned this, to maybe change gears and work on different projects, right? So because we're all now remote, we're looking. So we did like alpha/beta testing of open source conferencing software, just because I was like, you know what? If Zoom has some major issues, which, I mean, they've had air quotes security issues. We talked about it on Thursday. By no means is Zoom malware, or should you stop using it. If you want more, go listen or watch to that, that episode on PSW last week. But I'm like, it'd be nice to have an alternative. And certainly Skype is an alternative. But in both cases, we're relying on another third party. I'm like, what if is it possible to? It turns out there's an open source project called Jitsi, and lo and behold, it was built in containers. And I spun it up and run it, and John and I spent, probably all total maybe an hour, maybe two, from start to finish, just standing up and testing it. It's like, yeah, it works. Now, we're not going to use it right now because that's a whole different project, right? But, you may want to change gears and work on different things given the situation that you're in, right?
Yeah, and one of the recommendations, sorry, Jason, was, look at the task at hand and focus on just the things that are important. We'll talk about more aspects of this later when we talk about productivity and some of the other challenges with work from home. But you got to be really focused on what tasks you're doing remotely.
Yeah, 100%. And some organizations are in a different kind of burden, right? This is a different type of business resilience scenario that we're in. I look at this more like a wartime type challenge, like I mentioned in the article, right? I mean, we're not only looking at a fact of we need to pass the technology piece of this, right? But we also need to pass the employee side of the aisle, because think about this. You have organizations who are dependent on clients, right, to have that cash flow. Some of these clients that you're working with right now, they're reducing workforce, they're reducing business, they're reducing their interactions with you and their opportunities with you. So now what are you going to do with the folks that, may have had a client-facing role, and at the end of the day, there's not as much work in the pipeline, right? So organizations are facing that struggle right now. And like Paul said, can we take them and put them on other projects in the meantime? Because hopefully, I mean, we're all hoping this is a very short-term issue, but we don't know, right? Right now, we have no idea how long this is going to take for this type of workforce to continue on, right?
And Jason, a kind of offshoot question from that, not really related, but I'm just curious because in your position, I think you have unique insight into this. As I talk with my neighbors, because largely we can't go anywhere, so you go outside and you maintain your distance and you're chatting with your neighbors who are also in the same boat working from home. And we talk a lot about VPN capacity, right? So my neighbors are like, we're at 11,000, users VPN. Other neighbors are like, well, I didn't get VPN right away. It was a slow rollout. What are IT teams doing to source VPN? Is it hardware? Is it software? A combination of both? Like, how are they? I'm sure your clients are dealing and probably coming to you going, Jason, how do I scale 100%. My VPN to support another 5,000-10,000 clients?
Yep, 100%. A lot of organizations in their BCDR plan were ready for probably about 30% capacity when it comes to VPN, right? So they were looking at 30% of their workforce potentially being remote at once. Never in their wildest dreams did these organizations think 100%. About close to 100%. Yeah. Right. So from that perspective, it was all of a sudden a rush to get as much mobile workforce enabled architecture as they possibly could, whether it be, spinning up more WebEx license just so they could have remote meetings, VPN connections, spinning up more Office 365 licensing so they can get availability of Teams. It was a mad rush of folks coming in saying, holy crap, we weren't prepared. What can we do quickly to start enabling our workforce, right? And allowing them to work from home.
And fortunately, a huge
customer of ours.
I was just going to say, fortunately with cloud, you can do it with licensing and software.
Yes.
I don't know how prominent actual physical VPN concentrators are anymore. Is it mostly probably software now, right?
It's mostly software, but we still have folks who have, they have to spin up the licensing on their physical firewalls, right?
Yep.
But again, it's licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as their firewall can bear the capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a sizing perspective, they're in a good spot. But at the end of the day, they may have to right size it to 100% workforce. That's some of the challenge as well. Is speccing out new hardware to be able to support 100% workforce.
Right. And then trying to get that hardware, which I'm sure is in
and then trying to get it. That's the challenge these days,
now,
right? I mean, getting it these days is the biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But this is a different scenario, right? Most organizations did not see having 100% workforce. That's remote.
Yeah.
And
it ties into this the four behaviors that leaders display in time of crisis, right? That ability to make decisions very quickly, right? It's about speed, not precision. The ability to deliver in a reliable way and really adapt quickly and boldly to be able to be in a position to support what has happened, right? You said 30% to 100%. That's over 3x in capacity. Without some of those leadership skills to adapt quickly and move, I mean, you would not be in a position to support 100%.
100%. I mean, we shifted gears so fast from being in an innovation driving revenue mindset. And I say we as a community, right? Technologists, companies, businesses in the world. Up until now, we're focusing on innovation, driving revenue, building business, right? Growth. Now we're shifting focus to cash flow, controlling costs, supply chain issues, ability to engage with clients because they're dealing with issues, right? So now this is a totally different mindset that we have to be in. And if you can't think quickly and really be able to adapt to it and react to it quickly, you're going to fall behind very, very fast. I equate it more toward now, I'm starting to study things like incident command systems from FEMA. This is crisis management, right? I mean, we deal with incident management and problem management and change controls when we're in IT and security. I'm dealing with crisis management now, right? I mean, it's a different mindset. So I'm starting to study those things like incident command systems from FEMA.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, crazy. Some of the other articles I pulled in here is really about some of the work from home stuff. How to keep your remote workforce accountable, how to avoid burnout at work from home. Just some. This is a time where you have to really get specific on how to set the highest priority for tasks that need to be done and allow these teams to focus, be flexible with schedules. I mean, people, not only are workers home, your kids are home. They're not in school. So now you have to balance this really interesting between work and home and kids and everything else. So flexibility has to be a big part of what comes in here. I think, Paul, this is why you come into the studio to record. Because look, your kids are home all day now.
It's interesting. An interesting tip for folks is to be going back to our great story number one with all the tips from CEOs and CTOs is be transparent and be very communicative about what your plan is, right? And understand that your employees and team maybe have different needs, right? So when I looked at it for myself, I had to shift, right? I had to block out now. I basically look at my whole calendar and block out all kinds of different times, right? Because my whole thing is shifted. I don't need to leave early to take kids to sporting events because they're all canceled. So now I'm like, if I can stay home earlier in the day, right, have some work time very early, then when the kids get up, help them get settled, get their homework done, and then come in the office. So I've shifted my whole schedule, right? Now my communication is everyone sees my calendar and knows what's going on, right? There is, doesn't need to be a whole lot of communication on that. But that's how I shifted my schedule. And also that automatically shifts the ability for people to create meetings. So when they get the meeting link, those times are automatic. So I'm not at home going, I got to go because I got, an early meeting and leaving the wife and kids hanging or whatever your responsibilities are at home. So this is the time to, like what I did last week, look at your schedule, and you're going to be making some pretty drastic changes. Make sure you communicate those. And the automated scheduling is awesome, right? Because that allows your team, if you have a link, and there's several things that do it, it automatically adjusts to your schedule when you block off time. So that would be my tip.
I mean, right now as leaders, it's our job to be level-headed, right, and bring some level of clarity to this madness. I mean, that's our job for our team, right? We need to be committed to that, and our teams are all looking to us for support. So they need to know that we're all in this together. That we're going to give flexibility. We're going to be able to balance work life and in their life, right? So we have to share in these struggles. This is where empathy and leadership comes out. This is where you have to really be using it in times of crisis like this, right? So more flexibility for folks who are dealing with those challenges, where kids are at home, right? They're being homeschooled, where you may have a single parent who has multiple children at home that need to be homeschooled and juggling the work. We have to be I would say, over communicate in instances like this. I mean, I have weekly calls with my entire team to make sure that we're keeping up on updates and keeping the communication lines going constantly on what's happening, because it's changing so fast.
Yeah.
Things are changing on a daily, hourly basis that, and I almost feel like weekly is maybe too far at this point, right? I want to be communicating more than that.
Yeah,
because again, these folks are relying on our leadership.
Your process and your deadlines might change, right? If you had a process in place that revolved around working during a certain time, that's going to have to shift, right? And so a lot of my work time shifted early in the morning, late at night. So therefore, the process and some of the expectations on dates might need to shift as well.
Right.
Great.
For me, it didn't have that big of an impact because
you work from home anyway.
I'm in it all the time, right? But I have to make very conscious decisions around, okay, it's time to go get dressed, get in the office, etc. I could hang out in my PJs all day, but that creates some really weird scenarios for you when you're sitting there and you can't separate home from work anymore, right? And this is one of the big challenges that I think a lot of people who are not used to working from home could potentially fall a victim to, is there is no home versus work anymore. You've got to set some of those boundaries and try to maintain some of them. Now, the times may be different than what you're used to because of this flexibility needed with kids home and everything else, but you still need to draw some boundaries around that. Otherwise, it can be daunting very quickly. It's like, you're 6, 8 o'clock at night, but you start at 7 o'clock in the morning. You're still working all day, and your wife is like, when are you going to get out of that office? The kids are going crazy, right? You got to create some of these boundaries.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the articles I was in here was about burnout, right? And when you can't draw that line and separate, some folks may feel that obligation to always be on. A lot of folks were conditioned to be in the office. And when they're outside the office, they may feel some level of pressure where, wait a minute, I'm not showing my value. I need to overcompensate for this. And we as leaders need to be able to identify that, number one, and number two, say, listen, it's okay. Everything's fine. We're gonna get through this. It's about achieving goals. We're gonna change schedules. We're gonna work with you on different KPIs, different outcomes, different metrics that we're going to be looking at with a fully remote workforce. But the last thing we want to do as leaders is amplify that pressure. We don't want to put additional pressure on folks, and make sure that they're not getting burnt out. They're not spending 12, 15, 18 hours a day, working nonstop.
Right. Yeah, it's difficult when you're at home because you can. I brought in this article from Science of the People, 15 steps to take before your next video call. 15's way too many. I kind of narrowed it down. She gives a lot of good advice in here around appearance and different social aspects of it. But I thought it was an interesting starting list. It said get gear, and I put in here get the right gear. As you can see, being a podcast, we have a lot of the right gear. We get the headsets, right? We get headsets, camera, lighting. These are some of these initial tips that I think are really, really important for people to understand when you're on a video call. Is one, you need the right equipment. You need to be able to have the right frame, right? You notice my hands are visible. I'm not like right up in front of the camera kind of thing, right? And lighting is a really important part of these video calls as well, so that people can see you, they can see your expressions, et cetera. So a lot of the things that we are used to doing on a day-to-day basis in the podcast are really good tips for people that are doing video calls as well. We recorded an entire series, not part of a show, but it's on our YouTube channel, about working from home. And many of us in security who've been working from home or have worked from home for more than 5 years at a stretch, right? We're sharing our tips, coupled with John's knowledge and our knowledge of equipment and gear.
We're working on putting together like an equipment list. A lot of this stuff is not expensive, although availability is an issue. What many are doing is if you have a camera at home, like a GoPro or some type of other video camera, Nikon, Canon, or whatever it is, you can use that as your webcam if you get the right gear. So we have some recommendations during that segment on what if you don't have a camera inside your laptop, which should work fine for what you're doing, right? Again, placement and all that stuff is going to be tricky.
Yeah.
You do have other options because a lot of the stuff is sold out. Headsets, I've noticed, are not sold out, thankfully. And you can get a headset is awesome. I've always been a big fan of headsets, right? Because no matter where you turn, the microphone is placed correctly, and you've got headphones built in. A lot of the gaming headsets are not that expensive. Larry had one that was like $30, and I think he was using it during it sounded fine. And it's far and above what the internal microphone usually will do for you. So, if you are looking for gear, find us, let us know, ask for a recommendation. People have done that since the beginning of time on the podcast, always asking us for equipment recommendations. So we definitely have Amazon, lists set up. And you may not get it from Amazon, but we can definitely make those recommendations.
Yeah. The other thing I would say too is play with the technologies, right? You use the technology so you're familiar with it. I mean, there's been some instances where I've been on meetings with folks who aren't used to working remotely, and the nuances of sharing your entire screen versus sharing one window of an application, right? So that way, during the meeting, you're not seeing people IM you, that type of thing. So some of the etiquette pieces,
we
the
covered
nuances
that in our
of the
segment
technology.
too.
For folks in IT departments or security departments, send out some quick hit, best practices out to your organization, right? Give them the knowledge they need to have that level of comfortability with the technology. And hey, by the way, a level of security too, whether you're using WebEx, Zoom, Teams, whatever the case may be.
Right. Now, Skype had
empower the end users.
I could recite it verbatim, but because Skype has a test call system, and it's a British lady that has the voice, right? But we've always used that to test out because we're connecting something running Skype into our system, and there's so many variables, and you don't want to be bugging people for test calls. I actually forgot about that in our previous segments. Skype does have a test. So even if you're not going to use Skype, you can still use its test call service, and what it does is it lets you hear so you can know you're getting audio, and then you do a recording, and then it plays it back to you, so you can hear what you sound like to the other person, and if your audio is coming through. Right. Yeah.
Is your microphone level set right?
Exactly.
Other things are like turn off your notifications, right? Because you're in a meeting and ding, 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 constantly is going to come in, right? So turning off notifications is one of those other tips that works really well, just to not create disturbance during a video call. If you're on a big group call, muting your mic because there might be background noise or other things is a good idea, and then unmute when it's just little things you get used to when you do it.
People were really intrigued with I think it's a Jabra USB conference microphone, the puck.
Yeah,
and that gives you a visual indication when you're muted. You can change your volume levels. And we've got an expensive one that can handle larger groups. But just for my desk, I bought this little one. It was like maybe $70. It wasn't expensive at all. And it works great. Yeah, it's that one right there, actually. Yep. Yeah. That works great. Cool. And they were in stock.
Cool. The last one ties into the conversation we were having, Jason, with you about licensing, right? This is contract risk. I mean, if you think about the environment we're in with third-party contracts now, there's a lot of pressure on a lot of contracts across the board. And this article talks about some of the areas to focus on as part of your contracts going forward, because we're learning a lot through this process. Now, all of a sudden, people need more VPN licenses, for example. Well, do I know what the pricing looks like? Do I know what my renewal rates look like if I have to do a renewal in the middle of this process? All these little things in your contract are now becoming kind of in focus or tested while we're doing this remote work from home stuff. Yeah,
I would also say take a look at any, especially in this environment, any deals that the manufacturers have out there, because I know for a fact that many clients who went to add additional licensing, they were getting, I'll call it the COVID special, right? They didn't have to pay the full MSRP that their contract dictated. They're actually getting some type of a deal because of what's going on, and the manufacturers are basically saying, you know what, the price that we quoted you originally in this situation, we're either going to give it to you for free for 90, 60 days or whatever the case may be, or hey, you're going to get a discount, right? So take a look at that as well and see if you can leverage manufacturer discounts that are available.
Yeah, it's a good idea. There has been a lot of offers from various security vendors and other vendors out there to use certain services for a period of time for free to kind of get you through this transition period and hopefully eventually back, right? But we still don't know how long. So it's going to be a challenge. But then, you've got all these other contracts sitting out there. It's like, well, what's my requirements, in the situation where, can I put the contract on hold, or what are some of those potential issues that have to be addressed with your third parties?
Yeah. So right now I'm looking at it in two different fashions for my organization. Number one, we are a third party. So we're working for customers and we have to look at our customer contracts, right? And then our third parties that we're leveraging to do business with us. So from a contract perspective with our clients, we're having conversations with them around, listen, we know that our contracts are dictating on, let's say, on-site engineering. But in this case, we look for waivers, right? Where, let's say we're supporting a healthcare organization in Washington, let's say, right? Epicenter right now. So we're having conversations with customers around, listen, can we do this remote? Can this project be done remote? I know the contract states this and that, but listen, let's create a waiver, let's create an addendum, given the situation. And I will say 99% of the time, it's good to go, because all of these organizations are understanding the struggles that we're having, right? Not only do they don't want our engineering force to be at risk, but they don't want their organization to be at risk either. So we're having those conversations like that. From a manufacturer or a partner's contract, a lot of it, that I've seen and been experiencing is honestly, during the time of need, having that level of negotiation. Because I will say right now that any contract verbiage that we would want to push against in this moment has been pushed to the side, because every organization and partner that we deal with understands the struggle. So we've been able to make concessions. We've been able to negotiate properly. We've been able to work together to come up with a happy medium, right? So I've had a good experience. And anytime we've had to take a look at licensing rights or renewals or things of that nature, because just given the time, organizations want to be working with each other. We said in the beginning of the segment, we're all in this together, and that's partners, that's clients, that's any type of organization that we're doing business with. You can have the right conversations and get to an outcome, a positive outcome.
Yeah, and that means good, clear communication, transparency, and just the flexibility 100%. That you're going to need in this time, this environment. So. Gentlemen, thank you.
It's a different day.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you both for joining me today, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next week on Business Security.